Hello there, everyone. Hang on a second. I just realized that I'm using a different microphone.
How absurd.
Welcome to the worst quality of voice, Chris, DBAle episode. Spectacular, stupendous. Yay. No, but seriously, welcome one and all to Redgate DBAle. Yeah, that is, of course, a nice warbling from myself, Chris.
And me, Kurzweil.
Hello, Kurzweil. Bring me a cup of tea.
No.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that is it. Obviously, no guests or anything today. You're back to regular programming. Thank you. The original, the Madagascar vanilla bean, vanilla ice cream. Mwah. Perfect as it is. Don't change it. DBAle. And of course, today we
Why
are.
Madagascar vanilla?
Oh, because it's lush. It's the best vanilla.
What is it?
Yeah.
I don't get this. I feel like someone just felt the need to insert an adjective here.
I like Madagascar vanilla ice cream.
Are you trying to say to me in a blind taste test you could tell between a vanilla pod and a Madagascar vanilla pod?
Pass. No, perhaps not. However, it's a pretty absurd concept, wouldn't you say? And of course, today on DBAle, we are celebrating something that comes around only once a year, quite unfortunately, and that is National Absurdity Day. That is the 20th of November, actually, so it will be a day before we release, but still, you may as well celebrate it as absurd. And we can pass up on the opportunity to celebrate the absurd. So today we're going to be talking about the absurd or unbelievable things people still do in 2021 when it comes to database development pipelines specifically.
We can't pass up on a clickbait headline as good as that one.
Absolutely can't pass it up, not even one iota. And of course, we're going to be talking also about the news, an amazing webinar actually that just came out that we both highly recommend. And of course, we'll be giving you the regular rundown of the events digest, and if there are any Redgate events, not that I think there are. So Chris, you ready to get weird?
Always
ready to get weird. So with that in mind, what is your absurd drink for this episode of DBAle?
So I went with the most standard vanilla thing I possibly could in an everyday context, but the most absurd thing I possibly could find in a DBAle drinking context, which is a bottle of water.
Oh dear.
Redgate branding as well.
Way to let the team down there, Chris.
Absurdity.
It is absurd. But still, it's absurd to not be drinking beer, so you're on the water. I get it. I went entirely the other way.
I'm not surprised. You would never pass up the opportunity to drink.
I proper Marie Antoinetted this. So I have actually Black Label Lanson Champagne.
What?
Oh dear, why did I do this? But yeah, do you know what? I'm getting stuck in. So I
wave at the peasants as you pass them by.
So yeah, so it turns out that Lanson Champagne, it turns out that all of their champagnes are vegan.
Wow.
Because they don't use isinglass or milk powder for clearing agents or whatever they call them, coagulants or something. And I went into my local Waitrose. Other good supermarkets are available. For anyone out there who isn't from the UK, Waitrose is one of the posher people's shops, but it certainly isn't up there with M&S and Harrods anyway. So I'm going to get this one open. Hang on.
I mean, are there many people who actually do their groceries at Harrods?
I think there are some.
I'm
pretty sure there are probably some. Anyway, I'm going to get this open. Hang on.
I can't imagine like a Harrods equivalent of I don't know, like their basics range. Harrods Basics.
Harrods Basics. Other good department stores are available. Oh, look at that. That's a proper glass of champagne. What a way to finish a Thursday.
Unfortunately, the virtual background is kind of messing with that.
Oh, there we go. Cheers, Chris.
Cheers.
Oh, that's a good champagne. I'm very happy with that. What a DBAle.
Kind of weird that we didn't have like a pop-off. Like
Well,
we usually have the opening of the beer, don't we?
I opened the bottle.
I guess.
It would have been nice if I'd had a cork, but then I'd have had to buy a full-on 700ml bottle, and I would have fallen over. Honestly, I wouldn't have made it to the end of DBAle. You'd be like, Chris, it's time for the news.
Also, wow, would that have been a luxuriant purchase?
That's true, actually. I can't remember how much this little bottle was because I'm bougie and middle class that way. But it definitely wasn't the cheapest little bottle of wine they had. But it's tasty. And it's absurd. It's absurdly delicious. A Thursday afternoon, change places. Anyway, I had to get an Alice in Wonderland reference in there.
As you're passing by through the, I don't know where I'm going for the sentence.
No.
Pass that one along.
Indeed. The passage of words, just never going to make it. Never going to get them out.
Excellent.
Can you tell what we're doing yet? I'm sure you won't, but maybe some of you will. Indeed, some will be revealed. Oh gosh, that's so good. Welcome to today's episode of Chris Drinking Champagne. Today we've got Lanson. Next week, hopefully, Moe.
Ooh.
If they're vegan.
Moe for Christmas.
Moe for Christmas. Moe! I want Moe. I want Moe.
Anyway, we should move on to the I won't say the meat of the episode, but
the soya meat of the episode.
That would be a very weird thing
absolutely.
for either of us to say.
Yes, indeed. But of course, we're talking about the absurd, and hopefully anyone who's listening to this episode is already sat there thinking, why am I listening to this episode? It's quite absurd. Waitrose? What is this magical place you speak of? Anyway.
Oh, quick absurd anecdote.
Oh dear.
So I was playing chess the other day, and I actually got to use an en passant move.
When do you ever play chess?
Basically never. Sudoku a lot though. I never pass up a game of Sudoku.
I love Sudoku. Absolutely.
Also, my favorite mathematical object is a Pascal's triangle. Anyway.
That doesn't even have two S's in it, isn't it? It's a Pascal's triangle.
It could have two S's.
Chris.
Anyway, the main subject, Chris.
The main subject is, of course, the absurd things people still do in 2021. So we're talking all things database development here, and you would have heard us bang on about some of these best practices before, but given the webinar that we're going to recommend at the end of this episode, and I absolutely would recommend you go and check it out because it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Or it is absolutely fantastic. It was recorded and you can go and watch it. Is of course the absurd practices when it comes to things like monitoring, database provisioning, deploying database changes. And actually, I'm going to kick us off with one of my favorites to talk about, and that's actually manual processes. Now, when I say manual processes, the thing is, a lot of people, when we say manual processes, the first thing that they think of is that effectively they've got to, you almost imagine kind of cave people kind of hacking away a T-SQL script or a PL SQL script on a stone tablet and then passing it along to like a Stone Age DBA. But the important thing to bear in mind is that you can automate parts of the process and still have it riddled with manual processes that ultimately just undermine the nature of the pipeline itself. So effectively, even if you've got an amazing continuous integration process, if part of that process is to spit out the build artifact, copy it across onto a USB pen, and then mail it to someone, well, and that's a bit far-fetched, except probably for, I don't know, the military. And I'm sure that probably gets done at some point or another. But that is still manual, and it is still a massive break in the process. When we talk about true database DevOps, true kind of synergy of pipeline and smoothness of delivery, minimizing time to market, we mean committing a change and then everything in the middle kind of just happening, just making good sense, and then being deployed upstream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing is that we don't introduce lots of manual error. However, this is where it gets absurd, is that people build smooth, beautiful, creamy DevOps pipelines.
Smooth, beautiful, and creamy. Are
I'm
you
thinking
trying to
about
describe a
custard.
plate of pasta?
Of what?
Pasta.
Oh no.
I might have some
Oh,
pastries after that. Anyway.
I'm gonna pass out at this rate. Gosh, I love champagne. Anyway, so yeah, you've got this smooth, wonderful DevOps pipeline. I'm trying to describe things as basically like food because it feels absurd to me, but it's also got the downside of making me hungry. So if anyone's listening, like a really, really nice plate of like smoky,
You're
like
trying not to say pasta now, aren't you?
mushroom spaghetti with like a nice creamy, like salty, peppery, herby sauce. Anyway, now I'm plenty hungry enough, and hopefully the listeners are as well. Anyway, people build these pipelines. The Absurd Week is great for us because we go off on tangents so
I
much.
know, right?
Absurdity just comes
Now we
naturally.
can just like say whatever the hell we want. It's
Exactly.
great.
It's like tennis, but the whole world is our tennis court.
Exactly. You
Just hit
say
the
one
ball over there,
crazy
forget
thing,
it's gone.
pass it to me. I'll say the next crazy thing.
So so they set up these pipelines and then they riddle them with so much manual intervention you just couldn't even believe. Yes, we're up to one-click deployments. How many clicks does it take to get to prod from dev? Well, you've got to approve the pull request. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to argue with that one. Then you've got to then you've got to start the build because we want to build at set times, but we don't want to schedule it because we want to make sure the right people are around. So then we click build, and then we manually review the build, and then we manually copy across the build artifacts, or even if we don't, we then have to manually approve the deployment to integration, and then we have to check the deployment to integration, and then we've got to manually press next, and then manually check the deployment report. And then the thing is, immediately, once you introduce a lot of these manual processes, your pipeline is, to moi, absurd, quite the absurdity. But
as far as a smooth passage goes, that is not something that I would describe that as.
Exactly. So the important thing to bear in mind is, do you really need those manual interventions? And have you democratized this process enough that it doesn't matter if an employee leaves or a new person joins the team gets bigger, team gets smaller, team takes on different responsibilities. Anyone can handle these deployments, making it just an entirely smooth process.
Boom.
Go on. I thought you were going to interject there. No, Chris, you're wrong.
I was going to say, it's clearly a subject that you're passionate about.
Anyway, moving swiftly on. Speaking of Swift, actually, this is an interesting thing, is that I did speak to someone literally last week.
You spoke to Taylor Swift.
I did indeed speak to Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift recommends that you do database deployments in a way that enables you to have a nice lean pipeline and to minimize waste.
Amazing.
It was
Who
one
would
of the
have
weirder
guessed?
songs. Yeah, it was one of the weirder songs I heard. It was off the newer album.
The things you know, eh? So who are you talking to, Chris?
So I was talking to a Redgate customer, actually, funnily that, and they were telling me that they had gone from deploying something like once a week to multiple times a day, just by keeping the pipeline small, smooth, incremental. Effectively, they swapped from a state-based methodology to a migrations-first methodology, and they've seen great success from it, because now, instead of having to do great hulking comparisons, they're just deploying small, tiny alter statements. And once it hits integration, that's it. You know, if it hits integration and everything's worked successfully, the build, the deployment to integration, at that point, then what they do is just trigger the automated deployment upstream to prod. Because at the end of the day, they have this mentality that if it's made it to integration, if it has deployed successfully to integration, there's no going back. So if it does work, deploy up to prod. If it gets to prod and breaks, release a fix, go through the process, don't make a hot fix. If it gets to integration and it's been deployed and it breaks, then you make a new change in dev to overwrite the top of that one, but to make sure that you are effectively caring for the problem that you've caused. So you're effectively kind of cotton wooling it, so that yes, you will temporarily, within almost the same statement, release a change onto prod, but by the time it gets to prod, it's already been overwritten by the next change that came after it.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Go on, make another pun. I know you want to.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. But it does sound like manual processes should be put out to pasture.
This is true, as should you, because your puns have become très passé.
Hey, there we
I
go.
win
There
this
we
one.
go. Boom, boom. All right, my turn. I've got
Got
one.
another absurd thing, Chris, apart from leaving anything in your capable hands.
Oh, so I have a much shorter one, a much more specific one, which is SQL Server agent jobs, specifically manually logging in to validate that they've run successfully.
You what? Do people still do that in 2021?
I know, right? Well, there's a huge array of different wonderful ways you can check on these. You don't need to log in to every box to manually validate. If you have like 50 servers, for example, you're looking after, that's going to take a huge amount of time. There's a lot of different ways you can handle this. From the more complex or overarching, for example, if you had a monitoring solution like SQL Monitor in place, then that's covered. Or alternatively, Chris, I'm sure you know a variety of different ways to cover that through SQL script.
Let me introduce you to my good friend, a PowerShell. PowerShell friend PowerShell. Hello, I'm PowerShell. Good to meet you. I can do a variety of things.
I had to pass you that one for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And while we're on that note, another very similar one is simple itinerary management. There is still a lot of people who have a lot of very sophisticated ways to do itinerary management. A lot of very sophisticated ways that might seem kind of crazy if you take them out of their, I don't know, context or the original zone, or I don't know. If someone else were to talk you through it, I think you think it's mad. The best one I've ever seen is like an Excel file that was like the mother of it all Excel files.
Used as the back end of the UK's track and trace process.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up time and time again, right? But it was an Excel file that specifically, well, it was quite clever. It captured all this stuff, but it was an Excel file. Like,
oh no,
what?
is that the exact? Did I get the example?
Yeah.
I predicted the example. Anyway, sorry, continue.
But yeah, if you're using something like Excel to capture itinerary and literally what servers you have where and what's installed, I mean, that's a good process if you've got 10 servers it becomes an absurd process if you've got thousands. It's
True.
just not possible. And then you get to the whole manual versus automation thing, right? So
Yeah.
again, there are better ways. Again, I'm sure, Chris, you could suggest many different ways through script-based method, or this is something that we can do with SQL Monitor natively.
Oh, absolutely. One of my, I think, to take an aside, and normally we leave a lot of the kind of Redgate product specific stuff until kind of late on in the episode, because what we want to do is bring you a nice kind of interesting podcast where we talk about things that we come across and problems that we come across and how we solve them, and focus slightly less on the actual, hey, there's this other product. But one thing I will say is that SQL Monitor have just come out with their configuration comparison, and you can pick up configuration drift over the past 1, 3, 5, or 7 days. And the way that it
Hey, that's
highlights
an absurd thing, right? Like, how many people listening to this are going to be like, I'm infuriated by my developers changing a setting on one of these servers, and the cost threshold for parallelism has gone from 5 to 50. And
well, this is the thing. This is interesting because this is something you could start identifying by looking at traditional metric-based monitoring. So, for instance, if you see a spike in your CX packet weights, then yeah, maybe someone has been fiddling around with your max dops. Hello, I'm max dops, and that's fair, but it's still going to take you a little while to get there, to remote onto the server to check the configuration. But now in Monitor, I just have to go to the page and look at the side by side of prod and staging, or prod 1, prod 2, and go, that ain't right. Time to change the setting.
or even just be alerted if someone changes it.
That's true. That's also a good one.
Yeah. So there you go.
So another absurd thing, Chris.
Go for it. Hit me.
As I just revolve around. This is no good for anyone who's listening, but I revolved round to almost absurdly indicate that we'd moved on to the next thing. Hang on, let's do it one more time.
He's spinning. He's spinning again.
You know it. So the other thing that I find people do that's absurd is that they have weak passwords. And you're welcome. And the interesting thing is about passwords is that we've literally had an entire episode about passwords on DBAle,
and yet
what
the world hasn't learned.
Well, honestly, you would think that not everyone in all of the EU force their children to listen to DBAle before bed every night.
My mum passed on by a few weeks ago. I was talking to her about password managers. She had no idea what I was on about. Get a password manager, mum.
I was shocked. I thought you were about to say she'd passed on, but no, I'm glad to hear she's all right.
Phrasing was very careful.
It was phrasing, yes,
and
absolutely.
Also not careful enough at the same time.
But I keep saying to a number of my friends, have you got password managers yet? No, comes the answer. And you think, are you having a laugh? Do you use the same? I asked one of my friends the other day. I said, do you have a password manager? And they said, no, what's a password manager? And I told them, and they went, that doesn't sound very secure to me. And then I explained the reasons why it's more secure, and then you can have all the different passwords for all the different sites. And they went, oh, why would you need different passwords for the sites? I only have 2 passwords, one for serious stuff and one for not serious stuff. When I found out that Facebook was one of their serious ones, that's when I went, no, that's it. I'm sorry, we're going to have to get you a password manager now and change some passwords. So thank goodness I spent an hour and a half with a friend changing passwords, but now they're nice and safe. And actually, to be fair, they've already told their friends and family. I had a message yesterday saying, oh, I just got someone else using a password manager. Yes, that's a win. Where was I going with this? Yes, passwords. Don't use weak passwords and don't repeat passwords. I read an article the other day. Oh, absurdly, I'm almost dipping into news.
You read an article. It's pretty absurd in and of itself.
I did actually, as I sat here at my standing desk. Absurd. As I sat here at my standing desk, I was scrolling through LinkedIn, and I stumbled across an article, past an article of this person who had basically identified that a router. I can't remember whether it was the Dutch or Danish government. I promise I'm not getting those mixed up. If we have any Dutch or Danish listeners, I'm not getting them mixed up. I just remember that it was one of you. But basically, no, but basically someone had hacked the government. I think it was the Dutch government, if I'm honest. And somebody hacked they didn't hack the government. Basically what they did was they pinged I think a bunch of routers, and they identified that there was one or two routers that were still using like the admin base passwords, like they hadn't been changed when they were implemented.
Oh dear.
But it happens, like when you're looking after a huge network of different switches and routers, and you've got an immense amount of networking to do. And we've talked about this in the news in the past as well, you know, people getting routing tables wrong, and it's always DNS, all of these sorts of problems. And they found that this router still had the like admin password enabled, and they basically let the government know, the military know. And basically the military called them back up and asked for their address. And this person kind of went, oh, well, I was just trying to help. And they were like, just give us your address. So he gave them the address. And about a week and a half later, do you know what turned up in the post for this person who did the right thing?
I'm hoping not a person to arrest them.
A T-shirt arrived.
What was on the T-shirt, Chris?
On the front of it was, I hacked the Dutch government, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. I thought you wouldn't get, I mean, you wouldn't get that in the United States, would you? Or the UK, even for that matter, you know, or any other regime like similar, you know, you'd get someone knock at your door and say, you're coming with me, mate. But
yeah, or you'd get recruited by GCHQ. It would be one of the other.
By who?
The carpet people, Chris. The carpet.
Yes, to fit new carpets. Yes.
Yes. That reminds me of a story. Like, this is another randomly absurd tangent.
Like an absurd tangent.
So the old IRC chat posting board.
Oh yeah.
You ever go on that?
No. Too
so
young.
There's like this. There's a website that I can't remember the name of anymore. Wow. Where people would post like their greatest hits, and my all-time favorite one of these is the person who has lost a device. It's in the same room as them somewhere. It's responding to ping. They just don't know where it is. I love it.
That's fantastic. Well, as long as it's responding to ping, you kind of know that it exists. I had a similar moment yesterday. I was driving my wife home. We went out for a Christmas market. Spoiler alert, I put my Christmas decorations up on Sunday. Thank goodness it's mid-November. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a bit past.
You can attest though that my Christmas tree is looking absolutely beautiful. I would give it a pass.
I'm assuming that's I'm assuming that's not a real Christmas tree. Because is it a fake one?
It is a fake tree, but it looks absolutely stunning.
It just passes really well.
It does. It's a really good quality tree. But yeah, saw it. It was actually on offer, 50% off. Couldn't pass that up. So so I will just say that I was driving my wife home, and actually I was thinking about old websites yesterday, and I was thinking about a couple of the kind of early doors kind of flash videos that, you know, were all the rage in 2004, 2005, you know, literally just as Dragostea Dinte by Ozone and the Numa Numa guy all became famous.
The golden age of the internet.
Well, I was thinking of The End of the World. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a flash cartoon about the world blowing itself up, basically. Um, I love it because it always makes me think of the English, because they're on a yacht playing shuffleboard or something, and they just go, "About that time, eh, chaps? Righto." I was like, yeah, that's us. That's as long as they're sat there with Lanson Black Label, we're good.
This is going to become more and more absurd as Chris gets slowly more and more drunk, and
I
I
don't know what you're
stay
talking about.
exactly the same level of sober.
I mean, who was the person who got me a box load of beers for my birthday?
Yeah, I thought we were past that by now.
Indeed.
The sentences just don't make sense anymore.
I'm going to do one more before we move on to the news as well. Access control. Oh, it's a difficult one. A lot of people give developers and testers access to systems that they should not have access to.
For
A lot of people don't, but a lot of people do. And a lot of people forget to review access. A lot of people move teams and retain access. Have you ever moved team? There's so many people out there who have moved teams before who still have access to things. The number of times I've spoken to friends who go, "Oh, well, I've actually moved team. I don't do anything to do with that team now, but I still have access to the shared drive, the databases, the mailbox, all of these different things." You know, even now I have access to see the, even though it's nothing to do with me, I still have access to see some of the inbound mail that we get at Redgate, like incoming email from days gone by. And it's quite funny because you know, access control is something that absolutely fundamentally needs to be reviewed regularly, so that you can make sure that you're giving access to the right people, to the right systems. Because actually, all it takes is for one disgruntled employee on their way out, or for you to have 20 accounts, some of which are semi-inactive or inactive and potentially exploitable, for someone to get into the system. You know, the fewer people who have access to production data, the better. And unfortunately, a lot of people just seem to be like, "Oh yeah, we you know, in case we need to make a hot fix, all 30 of our developers have access to prod." Excuse me? Yeah, no, that's, in my books, that's absurd. I'm sure it's defensible for some people out there who have special use cases, but I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty absurd.
That was a long pause. I
There's a long
appreciated
pause,
that pause.
dramatic effect.
Yes.
Before saying something distinctly not very punchy.
I'm hoping in edit you just remove the pause entirely, so I seem a bit absurd.
That was quite a pause where it's just me going, and I find that a bit upset because it gets mashed together. What I'm also going to do is speed it up so it sounds like we have chipmunk voices.
Amazing. Or slow it down so we have whale voices.
Hey, baby.
Can you slow you down and speed me up? What that
Then
would
we
sound
might
like
both
is just
talk like
yeah,
normal people.
exactly.
So, Chris, what do you think is absurd? Well, actually, Chris, I think it's
Anywho,
Anywho,
I've got one more for me,
go on.
and it is using. I was tempted to say any version control system that isn't Git, but you know, some people still have uses for some of those.
What about my precious Subversion?
Yeah, I'm going to specifically say version control systems that are homebrewed version control systems.
Oh, do you come across many of those?
Yeah, well, we barely ever come across any version control system that isn't Git realistically these days.
Well, you say that. When I first started at Redgate all those years ago, because it's my six-year anniversary this month.
When another time the Earth has passed the sun.
Exactly. 6 years ago, when I first started talking to people, when I spoke to database developers in particular, they were often saying, we don't source control our database code. And if they were, 50% of the time they would say, well, not even that, 25% of the time I was getting Git, and then probably 35-ish% of the time Subversion. No, probably 40% Team Foundation Server, and then 30% Subversion.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then every now and then Mercurial, you'd be
Or
like,
Vault, yeah.
Excuse
Me? You what?
why?
Perforce who?
Exactly. I don't know. There's a lot of people who have said this already. Like, Git is so prevalent these days, it's basically standard.
Yeah.
And there isn't much reason to use anything else.
Yeah, true. Pretty
That's
absurd. Right. Well, you know what time it is, Chris?
The news.
The news, 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 the news.
We've missed our calling as just saying the word the news to different songs from childhood.
I feel like I need to do the BBC News introduction. Dun dun tonight on DBAle News.
Dun 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 dun.
Oh, that's a good song. Dun, 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 dun. Is it Papa's got a brand new pig bag?
What?
I think I feel like that's Papa's got a brand new pig bag. Hang on. Let me just.
Okay, we've lost Chris. We've lost Chris.
A brand new
Come
pig
back
bag.
into the real world.
Is it? It is. Papa's got a brand new pig bag. That's the song that you were humming.
Was it? Okay, anyway, the news. So, where do we want to start, Chris?
Well, I think the main one that we want to cover today, I think we've got a couple of things. The main one I want to mention is I've talked about a webinar that at the very beginning I mentioned a webinar that I think would be pretty cool if you went and watched it because it was super insightful. And that was actually basically it was a webinar in conjunction with our good friend here at Redgate, and also I think it was Steve Jones who was on with him, Troy Hunt.
If there's one person I know who'd recommend a password manager.
Yeah, definitely Troy Hunt, absolutely. We've mentioned Troy a billion times on this show. Not yet been able to get him on, unfortunately, but c'est la vie.
One day.
Well, Troy's very, very busy, especially with, I think he's retained haveibeenpwned.com. Anyway, so there was a webinar on the Redgate events channel called In Conversation with Troy Hunt, Security and Compliance in Database Monitoring. And it discusses some of the best practices and, might I say, some of the absurdities in database monitoring and ensuring good security around database development, database monitoring. So I would heavily recommend going and checking that one out. You can actually check that out just on the Redgate website. If you go to events, it will be under webinars, In Conversation with Troy Hunt. Troy's such a big name that I don't even need to tell you who he is, but I would highly recommend you go and watch that because it really highlights some of the things that you don't really think about when it comes to monitoring SQL Server. A lot of people are very metric based, very how can I monitor my weights? But actually, in many cases, there's a bigger picture, and I think Troy kind of sums it up nicely. There's a few things I want to touch on that they spoke about, and I think that there's there was a few key talking points from it, like reducing risks of data breaches by bringing security in earlier. Data is as much a liability as an asset, and even kind of regulations are creating an impact, but there's no real industry baseline. So there's a few really cool things in there to make sure that that you're following the best practices and sticking to some of those standards at an industry level. So definitely go and watch that. I think it's a fantastic webinar, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
Awesome.
That's not even the absurd part. The absurd part was just how good it was.
Excellent.
The absurd part is just how fuzzy my head is now feeling after a bottle of champagne.
Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed?
The bubbles. It's the bubbles, mate. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it, not the booze. So data breach news.
Ooh.
The big one we want to talk about this month was Robinhood. Robinhood is an app that a lot of people have got into. I guess amateur trading would probably be the best way of putting it. Whether it be
buying blockbuster stock.
Yeah, stock or crypto or whatever floats your boat.
Love their crypto. Chris, what's your crypto of choice?
I hate all crypto. I think it's all not great for the environment, apart from some specific ones like chia. Chia. Let's go with chia then. That's a good one. Except I don't believe you can trade it at the moment. But yeah, I also can't buy a bit of silicon to save my life. All I want is like a handful of silicon, and I just can't get any. It's terrible. Anyway,
I just want a handful of silicon.
They came out of fire a lot this year for various reasons. If you remember the whole GME stock debacle, and they were in the center of that one. Also, a incident where I believe they're being sued for someone losing about $780,000.
Wow.
Due to a missed transaction by them. But very recently, they have been under scrutiny for a data breach. And it's one of those data breaches that is, not through some clever technical manipulation, not through someone putting something where they shouldn't, but a simple case.
Absurd.
I know, a simple case of social manipulation or con artistry.
Ooh.
A social manipulator basically called up their support team and managed to get them to expose a total of 5 million customer records. And the level of detail in there breaks down a little bit further. So there was 5 million customers. Of those, I think there was about 400 ID cards. And of those, there are 10 customers who have been exposed even further than that. But apparently no telephone numbers, no social security numbers. The hacker who was responsible has now also, in an exciting twist, put this information out on the dark web for sale and is after 5 figures for the data.
Oh, is that it? Couple dozen thousand?
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends how you value that information, I guess. Like a lot of it wasn't the most highly sensitive of information. Like social security numbers, that's the real holy grail, I believe, that can get really valuable. But it's up for sale if you want it. If you're wondering what to do with your huge crypto earnings.
I don't have huge crypto earnings. I have I've got about 30 quid in new kind of network, about 20 quid in ADA, about 10 quid in Doge, and about 5 quid in Litecoin. So I'm not going to be the world's next rich crypto billionaire.
Yeah, give it 20 years.
Yeah,
Passing it back to you, Chris.
Oh,
what
thanks
else
very
have we
much.
got in the news?
Well, on that subject, we've been using the word pass. If you couldn't tell, I mean, it was
We've been
blatantly
quite
obvious.
subtle about it, I think.
If you couldn't tell that we were using the word pass literally the entire way through the episode, then you okay. But anyway, the absurdity is that pass is over. Can you believe it? Pass Data Community Summit has finished, and we've been building up to it.
I actually know
much.
a couple of the speakers on that.
Yeah, well, some of them are pretty intelligent, pretty pretty.
Oh,
yes, pretty nice. Can't think who they might be.
Someone who is on this podcast with me, but not me.
Well,
we'll leave
Chris,
it at that. We'll leave it at that.
That only leaves one person. Anyway, but yes, pass is over. Can you believe it? It's absolutely Yeah, I couldn't believe it, but it went by so quickly. The good news is, if you were registered for Past Data Community Summit, you'll find that you'll still have access to all of the materials for the next few months. So if there was anything you missed, or you want to take a bit of time to go back over anything, fortunately, you've got all the recordings and everything, all the keynotes and everything still on demand. And in fact, the keynotes are now available on YouTube as well. So if you didn't register, you can still catch the keynotes, the ones in collaboration with Microsoft, Brent Ozar, obviously all the big names. Then just go ahead and have a look on the Redgate. In fact, I think it's on the PASS specific data community platform YouTube channel where you will find a lot of this information. But if you missed it, I'm so sorry. However, guess what? PASS will be returning next year. Woo! So get yourself over to the PASS data community website, get yourself signed up for them notifications, and who knows, you could just meet anyone from Redgate next year at PASS
Don't
Summit.
let it pass you by.
Don't let it pass you by. But yeah, definitely get yourself signed up. Get those notifications coming, because this year was a doozy, and next year is promising already to be even better. And we're looking forward to seeing you there.
Fantastic.
In terms of events, though, obviously PASS is over, and there aren't really that many still to come. In fact, there's a couple that are being advertised for 2022. So Data Saturday Stockholm is already planned. There's also SQL Saturday Jacksonville in May 2022, Visual Studio Live from February to March 2022. And then there is still remaining one more conference that I can see, that I can find in 2021 in December, and that is Dev Intersection Las Vegas. So if you feel like going to Las Vegas, I don't know if they're actually making it a virtual event. They might well be, but if you're interested in attending Dev Intersection Las Vegas, then you will find it on devintersection.com. And in fact, I can see the MGM Grand Las Vegas workshops December 5th, 6th, and 10th, with a December 7th to 9th conference. So it's a SQL Server and Azure SQL specific conference. So do feel free to go along there.
Amazing. If I just happen to be in Las Vegas, then maybe I will.
Chances of that, Chris?
Slim. It's not impossible.
Say verging on the absurd, perhaps.
One day, though. One
day, indeed. Anyway, Chris, look, we've rapidly gone out of time. I can't even believe how quickly this time has gone. I can't even believe how quickly that champagne went down. How's your water going?
Still there.
Oh, well, as long as you're staying hydrated. In any case, Chris, it has been an absolute pleasure, as always, to speak to you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Not you, but thank you to the listeners for taking the time to listen to us. We do, as always, really appreciate it. If you have any thoughts, any feedback, or want to get in touch with either of us, again, remember you can contact us at dbale@red-gate.com, or you can contact me on Twitter, because Chris never checks his Twitter. So for me, it's at plantbasedsequel. Or plant-based SQL or plantbasedsequel.com. I'm getting my website and my Twitter handle mixed up. Plantbasedsequel.com for me. Anyway, for now,
one more absurd thought for you, Chris.
An absurd thought to finish us off. Go on.
Yeah, round off the day. Imagine that we'd be recording this whole podcast and you hadn't hit record at the start. We're just talking to each other for 55 minutes about random stuff.
That would be quite absurd. Fortunately, I did hit the record button. So, gentle listener, I leave you with this, and that, of course, is cheers.
Cheers.